Hi, my name is Jerrod Griebel. I grew up out in Burlington, Colorado, and I now work as an English teacher in Windsor, Colorado. And I'm talking today a little bit about the idea of honesty in prayer. So, growing up out in Burlington, I consider myself a child of the prairie. And when I say that, I don't mean just the geography of where I grew up. I also mean the idea of the homesteaders and the people who settled that land down to the people who live there now. They have a deep resilience and grit in living out in an open, barren countryside where they have to deal with the elements a lot. And growing up, I heard Dad often come home from working cattle and he would usually curse the elements, how he was so sick and tired of the heat or that blasted wind or trying to drive through a snowstorm. But what he was doing was being very honest in what he experienced about living and working out on the plains. And we see this honesty as well when we look at the Psalms in the Bible, that these are songs filled with both exuberant joy and jubilance, as well as deep pain and lament. And the psalmists are often very forthright with what they're feeling and experiencing, which honestly goes a lot against the culture that many of us were raised in America. We tend to be a little more stoic, and when we do express ourselves, it's usually just anger. But the Psalms, we see the whole spectrum of human emotions play out, which is important because God gave us the ability to experience all emotions, and there's no emotion that's bad. Emotions simply help us understand what we're going through or enduring in life. So I'm going to read through Psalm 88, which is a rather melancholy psalm, but I want us to consider what the psalmist is experiencing and why it's so important to be honest and forthright in this. So this is Psalm 88. O Lord, the God who saves me, day and night I cry out before you. May my prayer come before you, turn your ear to my cry. For my soul is full of trouble, and my life draws near the grave. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am like a man without strength. I am set apart with the dead, like the slain who lie in the grave, whom you remember no more, who are cut off from your care. You have put me in the lowest pit, in the darkest depths. Your wrath lies heavily upon me. You have overwhelmed me with all your waves. You have taken from me my closest friends, and have made me repulsive to them. I am confined and cannot escape. My eyes are dim with grief. I call to you, O Lord, every day. I spread out my hands to you. Do you show your wonders to the dead? Do those who are dead rise up and praise you? Is your love declared in the grave, your faithfulness in destruction? Are your wonders known in the place of darkness, or your righteous deeds in the land of oblivion? But I cry to you for help, O Lord. In the morning my prayer comes before you. Why, O Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? From my youth I have been afflicted and close to death. I have suffered your terrors and am in despair. Your wrath has swept over me, your terrors have destroyed me. All day long they surround me like a flood. They have completely engulfed me. You who have taken my companions and loved ones from me, my darkness is my closest friend. So in the psalm, we see brutal honesty from the psalmist before the Lord. It's very clear that the psalm writer feels alone and abandoned. And right now, in various ways, people feel different levels of solitude or loneliness or maybe even abandonment, whether that is with social distancing or with being in a shelter-in-place scenario. But even before this pandemic, people often felt alone and abandoned, both in our world but also from God. What I appreciate a lot about this psalm is how much the psalmist uses imagery to convey death and destruction, to communicate what he's experiencing. That it's okay to just say a simple "God help me" prayer, but in understanding yourself, it's also effective to use deeper imagery that to us might feel overly emotional. But when he says, "You've taken from me my closest friends, I'm confined and cannot escape," or when he questions, "Are your wonders known in the place of darkness, or your righteous deeds in the land of oblivion?" He's putting himself in a place of openness and death, that where he is the land of destruction and oblivion, that he's using these images to communicate what he feels and what he's experiencing. And it's very powerful in ending when he says, the darkness is my closest friend. In the Hebrew language, the psalm ends with the word darkness, that's the final image of experience. Now, I'm not saying that to be honest with God is to always be this melancholy or this dark. But what I see here is that, like my dad was being honest about being upset about the weather and the elements on the prairie, so the psalmist is being open and honest before God about his experiences. And I think that this is a healthy way to live our lives. God understands what you're going through, where your heart is, and what you're thinking, feeling. But it's important for us psychologically and emotionally to be able to come to those moments of honesty with ourselves, to put into words what we have or are experiencing, and to communicate and dialogue that with God, because he is the creator. He's aware and understands and wants us to go to him for comfort. So in finishing, I'm asking that you would learn to be brutally honest with God. If necessary, use your imagination, use strong imagery to communicate to God how it is right now or how it feels. Don't be stoic, don't be closed off. In my own life, both from how I was raised, but also just things that I've experienced, I often found myself not being open to anyone. Not to God, not to other people. I thought that I was a safer way to live, that I wouldn't be opening myself up to pain. But consequently, I learned throughout my teenage years and my 20s that I stopped feeling things in general. That I said, you know what, it's not worth feeling anything, whether it's joyful or painful, so I'm just going to kind of shut down. And it took me a long time to realize how unhealthy that is, how it doesn't benefit me at all. So instead, don't let our culture or your own fear hide your heart from God, because God listens, and he assures us that somehow everything will be okay. And most days, I think that's all we're looking for at the end of the day, is someone whom we love and trust to just tell us with assurance that everything really is going to be all right. And God does provide that for us. Lastly, right now you can hear some piano music in the background. I began playing piano when I was 5 years old, and music has always been a therapy for me. It was the safe place I would try to go to tell the world my troubles. The piano was where I would hide as a sanctuary from the storms of life. The song that you're hearing right now is an arrangement of the hymn Sweet Hour of Prayer, but this version that I'm playing is set in a minor key. I appreciate this a lot because our hours of prayer can be both joyful, but they can also be crying for deliverance, just like the psalmist in Psalm 88. At times, we can sing out with claps and shouts of praise, and at other times, we're more like Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, crying out for deliverance in a battle of wills. So I leave with this as a short benediction, the first verse of the hymn Sweet Hour of Prayer. And may this be hope and guidance as you learn to be very open and forthright with your Creator. Sweet hour of prayer, that calls me from a world of care, and bids me at my Father's throne, makes all my wants and wishes known. In seasons of distress and grief, my soul has often found relief, and oft escaped the tempter's snare by thy return, sweet hour of prayer. Be blessed. Thank you.